Good evening, everyone. Yes, this is Santa Claus, and he is ready to give you lots of great ideas and presents along the way. So if you haven't guessed, this is actually Simon Misiewicz, and I have to take it off now and reveal the mop top that I've got. Welcome to this evening's show. Yes, we are the Property Experts panel. And without further ado, and to save my embarrassment, I am going to do a whip round of saying people to introduce themselves to you. So my name is Simon Misiewicz from Optimize Accountants. I help you save tax on your investments. And Bronwyn, Teresa, take it away. Please tell us, the guest, who you are.
Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here again. I can't believe how time flies. This is our eighth event. 10th event with all my wonderful experts here. So I'm Bronwyn Burncombe. I'm a property investor and coach and #1 Amazon bestseller. So I love everything property, and I love all these people here because they help me succeed in property. And I'll tell you a bit more when we talk about our Christmas presents later. Teresa.
Oh, hi. Yes, everyone. I'm Teresa Kaczmarek. I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association, a bit of a mouthful. So as you can imagine, it's the membership and organisation is for landlords. If you've got tenants, then we have everything under one roof for you to manage, maintain your tenancies. We've got template contracts and documents, and we've got an advice line on hand, and also we've got a website which has got so much information in there for you all that you literally could get sucked in for days. So yes, I'm just here representing the NRLA, so hopefully I can be of some help today. Over to you, Simon Hodgson.
Right, thank you, Trent. My name is Simon Hodgson. I'm a mortgage broker. Great to see everyone again. It's a fast-moving market as ever. I seem to be reporting that every month. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of the rest of the guys tonight and answering some of your questions. Give you a good idea of what's going on. I'm going to go to Paul, please.
Evening, everyone, and welcome to our 10th Zoom meeting. I'm Paul Hilliard. I'm the Operations Director for LMPG, the Landlords National Purchasing Group, the UK's biggest and obviously best buying group for landlords. And if you've not heard of us, then please remember that if you're after a kitchen, bathroom, paint, anything for refurb, we're the place to come to, as we've negotiated rebates direct from manufacturers just for you as a landlord. So please check us out, www.lmpg.co.uk. And we're run by landlords, for landlords, and I'm also a portfolio landlord with HMOs, service accommodation, and vanilla buy-to-lets. And I've done some commercial to resi conversions, but probably not necessary at the moment because time's tricky. Over to you, Mr. Tim Bishop, please.
Hi, thank you, Paul. My name's Tim Bishop from Banalek & Bishop. We're solicitors. My law firm covers all the areas you'd expect to, but we specialise in a lot of property work. I have 22 property lawyers. And within that, we have a specialist property investor team who act for investors nationwide on a variety of projects. And we also have a highly specialist lease extension team, 5 people who do nothing but lease extension and freehold purchase. I don't know of a bigger, more specialist team in the country. In addition, I've also got property myself. I've done a commercial conversion. The 6 flats, 4 I hold on, I run as SA, a couple as ASTs, and also I've converted a 3-bed to an 8-bed HMO. So we are property investors who really, we're solicitors who really understand property investors. We also always provide free initial phone advice to any investor. So if you've got any query, don't sit there in silence, just give us a call. And one other thing we run with a chap called John Corey of Property Fortress, I run regularly 4 times a month online speed networking for property investors. So in fact, the exact opposite of this, I love this session. We get lots of information, but you don't have the opportunity to chat as you used to do when we had face-to-face. So we have created the exact opposite, and we simply do online speed networking, which does what it says on the tin. No speeches, no sales. It's just just meeting a variety of people from up and down the country. We do it 4 times a month. Next is this Wednesday. So if anyone is interested in that, do get in touch. Thank you. Back over to Simon.
Thank you ever so much. So this is something we haven't done before, and why would we give out presents in November? So we are in December. This is our Christmas special. So thank you ever so much for your 10th appearance with us. So what I want to do is for us all to try and give you Christmas presents for today. So what I thought we would do is I would start the Christmas present giving. And actual fact, it's not from me. Hopefully you can see this. I got a Christmas present from someone very, very important. I'm really enthusiastic and terribly excited, quite giddy, in fact. You'll know who it is. You'll know who it is. In fact, you'll probably be able to get it from here. Yes, I got personalized. There's no address on it. He must have hand delivered it to my address. So this is the envelope I've got. So I don't really want to open it. I'm quite nervous. It's well, let's go for it. Let's just see what it has to say. I mean, I'm just so delighted that I would actually get a present from someone so important. And let's have a look. Hopefully it's okay. It's not actually a present. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, oh dear. Capital
yes.
This is capital gains tax present taken back.
Taken back.
Oh gosh. Oh, wow. Okay. Not much of a present, is it? Okay, well, let's get rid of that. Right, let's go on to some serious presents then. So let's start with Bronwyn. What present have you got for our lovely audience?
Well, before I go on to my present, I just want to reassure all of you that we are going to be talking about your questions soon. We've had a lot submitted, of course, and we've had over 250 people register for the event. So we will be answering your questions. We just wanted to make sure that this was the special 10th edition. So my Christmas present to everybody who is listening today is I'm just launching a new product, a new program of webinars. And there's going to be 20, so not just 10, but 20 video webinars, including pretty much all of us here who have done a spotlight on your specialist area, plus anything you want to know about basic property investing, how to find your specialist area, how to work with estate agents, how to work with investors, how to do joint ventures, how to do refurbishments. I'm not going to list them all out now, but there's a link in there. I'm going to give you £200 off the price because you are very special people. And the link that will be in the chat box in the YouTube.
It's in the chat box now.
It's in the chat box, is to a webinar. So don't click it now. There's going to be a webinar you can watch with me explaining the huge benefit you're going to get. So I'm going to stop there and we can move on. Any other presents out there?
Shall I go on next?
Please do.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we certainly need to uplift the mood after Simon's depressing gift there. Well, what I can offer to the audience is a discount on NRLA membership. So for up to 2 landlords, it's usually £75 with a code of 123. It's simple as that, 123. You can get a discount of £10. Or for the membership, which is up to 5 people, that's £155. You can get a discount of £15. So I shall put the discount code in the chat box now.
Okay, well, I'll do that because it's YouTube Live. So,
right, okay.
Just 123, is it, Teresa?
Just 123, yeah.
Easy as ABC. Right, then, moving over to Mr. Hilliard.
Thank you, Simon. Can't go as high as Bronwyn, I'm afraid, but Merry Christmas to everyone from me and LMPG, and of course PEP. Property Expert Panel. As it's our 10th Zoom meeting, please use my voucher code PH10 to get 10% off your first year's membership of LMPG. So, and remember, if you join now, buy before Christmas because Magnet are putting their prices up on the 26th of December. So get in now with your kitchen orders. And I'll put that in the Zoom chat, but you probably need to post that into the YouTube.
I've done it. PH10. Perfect. Got it.
Lovely. Over to you, Simon, maybe? Simon Hodgson?
Yes, indeed. Okay, everybody. Unlike the rest of my colleagues, I haven't got a voucher code. However, I will happily offer 10% off broker fees for anyone who mentions the property expert panel. They reach and instruct before Christmas time. Absolutely. And I guess a piece of free advice, which is a gift, I guess, to you guys. There's a if you like, a bottleneck in terms of valuers and valuations taking place, and everyone's scrambling to get them done, even now before the end of the stamp duty holiday. I know that it seems like massive and miles away, but trust me, I was instructing some valuations earlier on today, but they came back and gave us a date of the second week of January as to when they could go out and visit. So if you imagine that lender then has 10 days to get the report back, we're massively marching towards March. So that's me. Tim, I think you are next with a massive present, I think.
Oh, here we go.
Being a solicitor, of course, we're famously generous. Everyone knows that, So, of course, I haven't just got one. I've got a sack full of presents. So shall I start off with one, which I didn't actually mention to any of my colleagues earlier. But in fact, what I'm doing, I'm in the process, and hopefully we'll launch it later this month, and it's free. It's what we call our legal masterclasses. Now, the theory is you don't need to have a legal knowledge or necessarily to do a better property deal. But if you have the basics, you understand the right questions to ask, and you understand the principles, it can make a real difference. It can improve your profit levels. You can find new strategies sometimes which legal tricks and tips can get you through. And also it can actually reduce your risk. So we're introducing a series of brand new free masterclasses. They won't replace the need for a solicitor, but if you understand these issues, you will see more opportunities and less risk. So we're launching those shortly. I haven't got a date, but it should be by the middle of December. And there should be a series. And they range, for example, one on joint ventures, how to create a joint venture, the kind of things you need to look into a shareholders agreement, and other ones varying from subjects as wide-ranging as non-disclosure agreements to all sorts of other things. So hopefully that'll be quite useful, and they'll be in short, snappy bursts. As you may have gathered, I talk quickly, so trust me, they're quick. So that's number one. Number two, my second present, is a tip following on from Simon, really. One of the things that's coming up quite a lot are people's concern about getting in before the end of March in terms of lockdown, etc. So my tips on how to avoid delays when buying and selling during the current crisis. So number one is actually the one you've heard already, really, and that's sort your mortgage out ASAP. I'm talking to our guys on a regular basis, and they're seeing this as a real issue. Quite a few lenders are going slowly. Second one, I think somebody's mentioned already, searches. They can be a real issue. I know recently Wiltshire, for example, where one of my offices is, having a 6-week delay. Now, if you add those to all the other delays, you start having some real issues. So make sure you get your searches done as soon as possible. And if you're particularly concerned about time, then it's worth discussing the idea of getting insurance against searches as well. There are a number of opportunities here. Solicitors don't like them. They're not as good as having the real search, but it gives you another option. Next up, in terms of what you can do, instruct your conveyancing solicitor as soon as possible. And that means if you're selling, I would strongly suggest you appoint them not when you got the offer, but actually when you put it on the market. Get in early, because otherwise you're going to have a delay. Solicitors are busy at the moment. Some firms are turning down work entirely. So get in early. You don't want to be at the back of the queue. And if you're looking to buy, then the moment your offer's accepted, get in touch with your solicitor. So don't delay at all. It really is important. Otherwise, you're going to cause yourself a delay. Next one is a very simple bit of DIY advice. And that's get your own paperwork in order. So don't wait for your solicitor to ask for stuff. So the kind of stuff you're going to need, for example, if you're selling a leasehold property, make sure you got the lease to hand, the original lease. Do you need building work guarantees, boiler servicing records, building control certificates, all these kind of boring bits of risk averse admin? If you've got them on day one, and as soon as you instruct your solicitor, if you're selling, you give them to your solicitor, again, that'll avoid a delay. And all these things do add up. A couple of days here and there, a week here, suddenly you can find you're 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months delayed, and that's going to cause real problems. Next up, building surveyor, book them as soon as possible. Some of them are getting really, really, really busy. So as soon as you think you might have something in place, book that surveyor. Don't leave it. Next up, removal companies. they're getting chock-a-block. So the moment you have an exchange date, you can't do it before you have an exchange date, but the moment you get an exchange date, make sure you get your removers guaranteed. In fact, it's probably worth having a chat with them if they're local and you know them, or even if you don't know them, in advance to warn them to see if you can kind of provisionally line up a date. But otherwise, again, if you suddenly find you haven't got your ideal date, real problems. And a couple more. One is, as we get nearer to the end of March, unless the government come up with some sort of generous late Christmas present about extending it or changing stamp entirely, which is perfectly possible, but we have to go on the basis they're not, then there are certain clauses that can be put in contracts. For example, if you do have to pay extra stamp, who's going to pay it? Might it be shared with the other party? There are a number of clauses to deal with these kind of issues and delays that may take place. So you might need to start discussing that with your solicitor. And last and most important, it's actually getting the right solicitor. Now, I've got lots of pet theories, and one of my own personal pet theories at the moment is that post-COVID, law firms have been divided into two. One set of law firms are reasonably good with technology. They've adapted. They've got phone systems, people working from home, and often you can't really tell that much difference. It's a pretty normalish kind of service, even if they're doing it from lots of homes around the country. And then the other half are law firms, and really I'm embarrassed to be in the same profession as them. They're simply appalling. They're all over the place, and they're causing the biggest delays of them all. My guys tear their hair out when we go to certain firms because they know they're not going to get a quick response, and there's nothing you can do. They ring, they email, short of actually going around and knocking on the door, which wouldn't be answered. There's not much more you can do than all these kind of things. And so make sure that first of all, your solicitor is one of those who's got capacity and is going to act swiftly. He uses email, and secondly, if at all possible, make sure the other side also has one of the good guys. Because if not, however good your solicitor is, if they've got one of these slow coaches on the other side, you're going to have major problems. How do you identify them? Well, hopefully, if you've got a good solicitor, you'll know them already. Talk to them. If they're good, they'll be open with you. But the other trick is very simple. Ask local estate agents. I guarantee all your local agents will know exactly who the solicitors are who are up to speed and who are the ones who aren't up to speed, and they'll be really frank. I think, in fact, agents won't ever recommend some of these dodgy solicitors ever again because they're doing such an appalling job and they're creating agents' life of hell. So there you go. They're my tips on how to avoid delays when buying and selling in lockdown. I think I have some other presents, but I think I shall keep those for later. Simon, who's next?
Well, what I would do is ask YouTube viewers to make sure that this is live, so you know it's live. Why else would I wear a jumper in July? It's obviously December and it's our Christmas special. That's why we're wearing this jumper. Because it's live, you can ask your questions and make sure. So just to test that this is all working, what I would like you to do is give us a present back, and that's smash that like button and smash that subscribe button on our channel. That will tell me that you're alive, which is good news for us. So if you could do that for me, just smash that like button if you find this useful. And at the same time, get your question typed in, because that's what we are going to be doing now without further ado. So the first question we have got, and this is from our WhatsApp. So you've been asking questions already. So whilst you're clicking and smashing that like button, I will be reading the first question. And it says at the top here, so let me just go to the most appropriate one. It talks about partnerships. Now, this is an interesting one because partnerships itself is something that you need to consider when you're in property. You might be in partnership where, as a husband or wife or civil partnership, you could be in partnership with a joint venture partner, and you could be in partnership with other friends and family. What does that really matter? Well, what's nice about partnerships, as long as you have a partnership agreement, then you can decide who gets the profits and how you can allocate them. It doesn't matter about having a deed of trust in place. You can simply have a partnership structure in place, and provided that you are in adherence with the Partnership Act 1890. By the way, that's a Christmas present in itself. Do go on to Google and look at the legislation around the Partnership Act 1890. I'm sure it's about 300 pages. So happy reading. Have a look at that. But as long as you are managing the portfolio, you don't use a letting agent, you can use a partnership structure, which means you can manipulate all the incomes that you want, as long as you don't don't keep changing it year on year. So make sure you speak to your accountant about that and tax specialist to find out how you can take advantage of the partnership structure. Now,
so can I intrude on that one?
Sure thing.
Just to point out that in terms of a partnership, as soon as you go into business with someone, unless you form a limited company or a limited liability partnership, you've actually formed a partnership, even if you don't think you have. And even if you haven't got a partnership agreement, there will be an agreement between you. And the absence of anything written, it's actually guided by the Partnership Act. So actually you're in danger unless you get your own bespoke agreement setting out what you guys actually need. You're going to be hamstrung by guys who probably died about 110 years ago, which is not necessarily a good thing, because it's a pretty aged document, the 1890 Act. So therefore, I would strongly urge, if anybody is going to partnership, don't just assume everything's hunky-dory. A, you are in a partnership if you're working together, but secondly, you do need to make sure that that if the Partnership Act doesn't provide what you need, you have something clearly written, professionally drafted in writing.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And it seems that what I don't want to do is get involved too much in tax questions. So I will try and filter them out a little bit and spread them out. Otherwise, it becomes a tax show. And that's not what it's about. It's the Property Expert Panel. And a panel means multitude of experts, which you can see. So the last tax question I shall answer is this one. Arash says, should I pay any capital gains tax for the one property that I have if I want to sell it to my property company, considering that now it's been 2 years and I've moved out of it? And unfortunately, Arash, if you are listening in to this live session, which you should be doing if you've registered, otherwise you won't be listening to this reply. Automatically, yes, you will pay capital gains tax if you have moved out of the property. You will get private residency relief if you lived in the property, but let's not forget that you have this other form of tax called stamp duty land tax. So even though the stamp duty land tax holiday is still in existence, you will be paying the 3% SDLT higher rate by moving it to the limited company. And I have to say, in most times out of 10, it doesn't make financial sense for you to move it to a limited company after you pay CGT, stamp duty land tax, and sometimes a higher rate of interest. So that said, let's move on. But don't forget, guys, to press that like button, get your questions in. I can see that 27 people have pressed the like button, which means that the other 50 people have yet to find that like button. And it's just below that video link. So if you can do that for me, that'd be greatly appreciated. So we got to another one saying, now we have got a loss in our team. Obviously, Jenny is now retired. So she must have done very well in a property investment journey. But, you know, our thoughts are with her, and hopefully Jenny is watching this show as well. And she, like you, will be smashing that like button. Anyway, have I talked about like buttons enough? So the one question that's come through is, Teresa may be able to speak on the right to rent will change for European tenants from January. Here we go. Then, Teresa, get ready. I've tried to find some information. It seems we don't have a directive yet. And that's from our lovely Jenny. So even though she's retired, she is still working on your behalf. So, Teresa, what do you have for us on this show tonight?
Right, so well, the right to rent, that applies to England only and for 18 years plus. And there have been changes throughout the year with the pandemic. So there's been a new process in place on how to carry those out. But we are approaching obviously the end of the year and Brexit. So the situation is that if you have got pre-existing tenants who are EEA, EU or Swiss nationals, then they need to apply for pre-settled or settled status. So the settled status is that, you know, they've been resident here for over 5 years, and pre-settled is under 5 years. And they have got, I think the government has put till the 30th of June 21 for those tenants to register. And that is pretty much the only guidance that we've got so far with regard to that. We don't know what the government are going to do with the pre-settled and settled status once they've registered. We just know that that directive has been given out. So if you've got new tenants coming in, then it's all on the government website on what documents you need to obtain from your tenants. The NRLA have got a huge amount of resource on what to do, but essentially if you've got tenants coming in from abroad, new tenants, then there's a new online check-in service that you can use. So tenants have to, there's two ways to do it. The tenant can either register with the government and provide you with a code, or you can do it online through email and Zoom. But yeah, that's pretty much it at the moment.
And don't forget, guys, your codes for LMPG 10% discount is PH10. And for your 10% discount from Teresa for NRLE membership is simply 123. And with all that said, we are going to now move over to Tim and the wonderful Simon Hodgson. So the questions is, gentlemen, is what have you heard from your contacts with the government? Because clearly you do. In regards to the stamp duty land tax holiday, will it be extended? And moreover, if the stamp duty land tax could be extended, will we see 95% mortgages? So let's start with you, Tim. What have you heard on the grapevine?
Absolutely nothing. To be perfectly honest, I think it's really difficult to predict. The one thing that you can predict in the last 6 months is that governments have stopped being predictable. The fact that we're in the middle of the biggest recession since 1708, and yet we're in a housing boom, I think it shows that the world has simply gone mad. So I think there are two options. Number one, the government will simply extend it. Alternatively, it is possible, and again, I've seen this being discussed by commentators, they might take the opportunity for more of a long-term restructuring, because it has certainly been putting a lot of people off buying property. And if they're looking to keep the economy stimulated over the next few years, which is going to be difficult as we dip into more unemployment and more of the actual financial implications of the various COVID and Brexit, etc., then they may well take an opportunity to do that. But whether they do, no one knows. When they do, no one knows. I would only comment that the last example of last minute government change was, I think Teresa will know about this, when they changed right at the last minute the changes to removing tenancies and evictions. It was coming in on Monday. The government announcement came at 12 o'clock on Friday. So the idea of government announcing things 6 months in advance and whatever, that's long gone. This government is panicking, it's reacting, and I don't think you can. So I think at the moment you've got to assume what's happening is happening. In other words, that it will simply end on the 31st of March. But watch this space, because anything could happen.
Interesting.
Simon, mortgages, what can you tell us?
In my private phone call with Rich earlier on today, gave him a quick call as you do. He didn't pick up. Why was that? Hey?
Sending me a letter. That's why he's hand delivering it.
In terms of, that's a really great question on the first time buyer sector of the market. It's still massively empty, that space. 95% mortgages are not available at the moment. There is small amounts of talk in the background with lenders, but it is really just hearsay. At the moment, they've got nothing concrete to be able to do it on, because they're still fearful of a drop in the market space. So generally 10% is the minimum deposit you're going to need at the moment. And even then the rates aren't great. 15% will get you a good rate, 10% will get you a mortgage, 5% you haven't got a chance any longer. The package hasn't been firmed up, but the government will be launching a package in April to help first-time buyers. They specifically outlined that there is a challenge within that sector of the market space. We can't operate as a whole as investors without that part of the market being properly functioning. It will come back somewhere and bite us on the bottom if it doesn't. In terms of stamp duty, definitely the government are very I'm not going to say reactive, but in terms of quite proactive in working out that they need to do things to stimulate the economy. I think there's a decent possibility that they might continue the stamp duty holiday, but however, possibly remove it for investors, but leave it in place for first-time buyers and home movers, so that they're actually stimulating that part of the market space, which has not necessarily been as well. That in conjunction with a package to help first-time buyers and to bridge the gap between the 15% and 10% deposit mortgages. So potentially the government will kind of bridge that gap to either 95% or 100%, so that first-time buyers can get in and then possibly monitor how that stimulates that part of the market and whether they need to continue stamp duty for the rest of the market. But to be honest, there's no real firm answer right at the moment.
If I can just come back on that one other point, Simon, I think there's been one big change. And again, I'm always more interested in long-term changes rather than short-term opinions. But I think the big change has been with governments. For a long time, the Labour government has been fairly proactive, has wanted to get involved in the market. Conservative Party has traditionally, in theory at least, tried not to. There's been a massive change there. For whatever reason, the Conservative Party have now become absolutely committed to active government. And I don't think it's going to be restricted just to throwing money at the economy recently. It's a real sea change, and therefore I think you can see more and more government activity and more involvement in the sector, and sometimes that might be quite helpful in terms of things like stamp duty, but I think there are also going to be quite a lot of hits, and I think they'll look at easy targets. And I'm afraid to say I've always felt that property investors aren't terribly popular, and we're looked as being rich fat cats, so expect to see more niggling regulations being imposed on us bit by bit by bit. But I think there is a significant sea change that COVID has caused, and that's we now have two governments who are proactive and actually believe in getting involved in the market economy. So therefore, perhaps things aren't as predictable as they would have been pre-COVID.
That is a really interesting point. Yeah, for sure. However, yeah, all of the previous talking of Labour getting involved in the housing market has been a pretty, I would say, unconstructive proposal. So I don't know about you, Tim, but Team Blue, anybody?
Well, let's move on from that point. I mean, just in case you're wondering why Tim's not wearing his Santa jumper, we know that there's a financial crisis, and as such, Santa is being defended by Tim's firm because Santa was caught shoplifting simply because he can't afford to buy all the presents he used to be able to. So if you were just wondering, he's not being by humbug at all. He's just defending Santa. So the question now comes from Lorraine. Lorraine asks, what do you think the property housing market is going to be like in 2021? So clearly you've got glass balls, Paul. See what I've done there. So if you can, you yourself and Bronwyn can talk about the 2021 forecast, I'm going to get onto Ladbrokes right now, and whatever you tell me, I'm going to put as a bet straight away, £100. So off you go.
Who's going first? Okay.
Bronwyn.
You ready, Simon? Ready? Hot off the press. The property market will go up in certain areas and it'll go down in certain areas. So, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I add to that?
I think so. That was so informative. I'm just
okay. So if you read the press and if you talk to and look at social media, then you'll get the doom and gloom, won't you? You'll say, yes, it's going to be a terrible recession and everything's going to implode and property prices are going to crash. I think that's rubbish in terms of, this is different. This recession is so different from the last recession that was caused by liquidity and the global crisis. Yes, this is a global crisis, but we've printed lots of money. We've got great liquidity in the UK and across the world, which means that lenders are happy to lend. They have money, they want to lend, and they're lending at very, very good rates. That's not changing. And then the other side of the equation is people still need to rent. There's still high demand for rental. But what we've got to do as investors and people who want to learn about investing is to do your due diligence, understand where's high demand for rental? Where are the areas in the country where the economics are positive, where you've got good employment, and understand those areas really well. And then learn with an expert and understand, how do you find motivated sellers? How do you find those great opportunities to buy below market value and to rent at market value, adding value. So, I am an investor. I know how the market works. If you want to reduce your risk and understand this, you've got to get an education. And then next year, there are lots of opportunities. You've just got to keep close to what's happening. Yes, Rishi Sunak might, he might extend the stamp duty holiday. you know, what we've had since the first lockdown is a huge boom. Prices have gone up in the south and quite a lot of the country. Prices have increased. I think that's flattening out now. I think, you know, Christmas out the way, January, maybe stamp duty being extended, stamp duty holiday being extended, that will, I think, stop us falling off the cliff when everyone's trying to race to the end of March. So as ever, I'm positive, but I'm positive because I understand what the demand and the economics is. That's my view. So I think 2021 is going to be a great year. You've just got to make sure that you're not piling into certain areas which are perhaps a bit oversaturated in certain strategies and regions.
Simon, can I come in here again? And I promise after this, I'll shut up for the entire hour and a half. So
you promised me that.
I do.
Everyone's heard you now on YouTube. Do you promise that?
Solicitors keep their promises. Zip. And I'm going to try something which we haven't done before, very exciting. I'm going to try to screen share because I've got some stats here which are very relevant at the moment. Let me put my glasses on to actually read them properly. So first of all, if I can get them right, bear with me. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, technology. Yay. How are we doing? Yep. There we go. So can we see that?
Yep.
Right. Yes. These are very personal because these are the figures from my law firm, Banalek and Bishop. And so while they're not quite as up to date as some from estate agents, they're months and months ahead of land registry. And what it shows is the number of conveyancing transactions we have opened. Now, that's in a sense is a bit more accurate than estate agents taking on cases because these are actually offers that have been accepted and then solicitors instructed. And as you can see, we average, we were averaging about 100 a month. It's about 1,300 a year. Well, last November, December, it's always a bit low that time of the year. Picked up again, as you'd expect, February, better on average, and then as expected, absolutely rock bottom down there. Now, what's interesting is you look, this was around how much we lost there, but look how much more above average we've had. And what's amazed me is actually, if I tell a lie, I've actually got the wrong ones on my month out of date. They've actually continued to go on and actually increase. So I can get the correct one. I'm rather embarrassed here because I've got the wrong one. No, I can't get the right one. Yes, I can. Hang on. No, I think it's a month out of date. But anyway, I guarantee, in fact, what happened there after September, it goes, that's October's not accurate. It goes to there, and then it comes down to about there. So the fact is that statistics are much, much higher than they should be this time of the year. And the growth has boomed since June through to November. So it's been very, very frothy with a huge number of transactions, which is surprising. And I think that is probably what's encouraging the growth at the moment. Everybody's rushing for property. Everybody wants to do stuff. Now, it may be that we're slightly disproportionate. Some firms are turning work down. We're taking it on. We've taken on extra staff. But certainly that won't continue. That very, very high level won't continue, I don't think. So that's number one, really, that it is a very frothy market. And when it's frothy market, bargains are harder. I agree with Bronwyn entirely. If you can get added value, if you can add value, then it's always a good deal. But ultimately, I think at the moment there is a danger that property prices are high. Certainly in terms of auction prices, they seem to be ludicrously, stratospherically high sometimes. So that's sort of number one. Bang up to date information. If I'd actually bothered to show you the correct one. So if I can show you another one now, if I can get this one right. If I can't, I will apologise. Here we go. This is some information I picked up from various of the leading estate agents. So Savills, many of you will have known, perhaps one of the biggest of the high-end commercial real estate firms. Knight Frank similarly, and over there PricewaterhouseCoopers, the accountants. Well, what's interesting is for UK, as you'll see, Savills were pretty gung-ho about 4.5% growth this time last year, even gung-ho in the summer. But now in October 2020, that's what they think is going to happen in 2021. Absolutely zilch growth. They're not saying it's going down.
Just so you know, I'm not sharing the screen yet.
Oh, no, you're not saying, no? Oh, that would explain. Hang on, no, it's clearly too complicated for me. I thought I'd done it, but clearly I'll have one more go and then I'll shut up. One more attempt. My apologies. I thought it was going to go all so well. Try.
Well, if it doesn't, hold on, something's been shared. Here we go.
You got it?
Yeah.
See that.
Right, good. So going back to what I said, as I said, Savills were gung-ho last year. This is what they're predicting as in October for next year. Absolutely no increase. But what's interesting is if you look at their 5-year growth, and again, this was also made in October, pretty positive growth, not stratospheric, but I said average in the UK 20.4%. So that's roughly on average 4% a year. And in fact, if it's 0% next year, it'll be over 4 years, so it'll be 5%. And then it varies from London at 12, going all the way up to the Northwest at 27, but broadly between 12 and 27. So pretty decent growth. It's not stratospheric, not the sort of, the 10, 20% perhaps some of us have been hoping for. But if you're looking to invest long term, that's pretty decent. And some of the other figures, these tend to be older and were more positive. But that's an interesting one to me. So I think they're entirely right. I don't think there'll be growth next year. In fact, I think they're positive. I think in some areas there will be a slip back, whether it's a big slip back or a small one, I don't know. But that's more interesting. Whether, again, they're being too positive or negative, but that shows quite positive growth. So therefore, sometimes it's a question perhaps of waiting until the right moment, getting the right bargain. They are around, but I think at the moment we have a very frothy market. I will now, as promised, shut up.
That's the word of the night, frothy.
I was going to say frothy market. Bronwyn, I'm glad you just chipped up there, because Deepak has asked the question, how's Africa? And I think whilst we're talking about property investing, why don't you give people the opportunity to just understand from your perspective? Obviously, you're doing something that you are passionate about in Africa, which you're going to share with us in a second. But people listening to us need to understand that property investing can replace your JOB, which it has done. So why don't you give us a 5-minute appraisal, or maybe 2-3 minutes, that'd be good. But if you can give us a appraisal of your past, your property investment journey, and what you're doing as a result now of property investing.
Sure. Okay, well, it's all in my book. So what I'll do is put a link on YouTube. I'll give it to you, Simon, for my book, because I'm passionate about wildlife and wildlife conservation. And when I started learning in property, I was working full-time in banking. And I was encouraged by my mentor to think about what would I do with my time if I were able to replace my job and actually be full-time property. I thought, great, there's a place in Africa, in Namibia, that I wanted to go and volunteer at, but I never had enough holiday to do it. And it's the background to my phone. You may not see that, but the background to my phone is a place called Nankuse. You can see pictures of cheetah here. It's still the background to my phone. And 8 years ago when I started, I put this as my background. And I am in Namibia today. I've been here 2 months. I'm planning on staying a few more months. And I'm volunteering for this organization, and I'm helping with wildlife research and conservation. It's amazing. My husband's here as well. It's his first time here. And if you read my book, you'll see why it's so important to me. So yes, I'm able to balance my work and my adventures, and having traveled around the world, as some people know, in 17, 18, and 6 months in Australia last year, it's a bit of a theme. As long as I've got good Wi-Fi and it's sort of holding up for Africa, it's not bad, then yes, I'm balancing the both, and I'm coaching and teaching people as well. So yeah, it's amazing what property can give you if you've got great experts, as I have here, and people back home managing my properties. The hard bit is the learning and the doing and creating the portfolio. And then the relatively easy bit is paying other people to help you. And that's what all these guys and girls do for me. So yeah, that's where I am.
And you've heard it here first, guys. Property investing does indeed extend your life. As you just heard, Bronwyn has been touring the world since 1718. I mean, wow.
1718, yeah.
That's good moisturizer, right, guys? I mean, if you, that should be straight on the list for Christmas present 101. Maybe staying with you, and Teresa, maybe let's go on to you. Which towns have you seen affected by COVID-19? Is there a particular trend? And maybe Paul Hilliard, feel free to come on to this as well, given your very useful insights in the last comments. Which towns have you seen affected by COVID-19? And is there a particular property type that's been affected by COVID-19, good and bad?
Well, clearly students. So students and HMOs, serviced accommodation and holiday lets to a point, but I think they've also taken off as well. So when it's full lockdown, obviously holiday lets don't work so well, but as soon as lockdown's finished, then holiday lets take off. And I'm seeing that with both of my holiday lets at home, including my own home, which I holiday let when I'm away. I've got somebody staying there now for 3 months, paying a holiday let rate. So where are the worst places? I'm never negative, but it's going to be the areas which have had the greatest lockdown situation. People are finding it harder. Businesses are struggling. So there's a knock-on effect with employment, perhaps people being able to afford their rents, maybe HMOs. But certainly down here in the south, my HMOs are performing fine. They're not taking off. I'm not increasing rents. I've reduced a little bit some of the rents, but I'm certainly doing okay in terms of income. And these are working as well as young professionals. So not too bad. But Teresa and Paul, maybe other parts of the country, what are you seeing?
Teresa, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I'm not sure she can
Sorry,
hear.
yes, I was just scouting around on the NRLA website because we, research data, but it's not some. I can't find anything which is sort of pinpointing any particular areas. I was, maybe just come back to me a moment because I am just looking at the research hub that we have, but I'm not finding it too easy at the moment.
Well, we probably will be back with you in just a second because Paul Hilliard's insights are fantastic. So let's go straight to Paul Hilliard.
Well, let me say that next year. Well, I was in a meeting with a guy called Andy Foote, and those educated amongst us will know he's one of the top directors at Seven Capital, one of the biggest property developers in the UK. And he remains very bullish about Birmingham, and a little place called Bracknell, which surprised me. And they are still sticking with their high investments in those two areas. So if you want to look at areas to perhaps jump into, then those two. Obviously, Birmingham is very much tied to HS2 development, which albeit is 5 to 10 years away, but definitely showing contractor busyness, shall we say. And putting my LMPG hat on, what I would say is that we haven't seen much much slowdown, shall we say. October was our best of a month with Magnet on kitchens, with nearly £600,000 worth of sales, which is by far the biggest. And our average kitchen is about £1,800. So you can, if you do the sums, you can see how many kitchens are being bought. And membership-wise, is growing throughout the country. So we are pulling in. I think again, October was a huge month for us with nearly 450 people either renewing or joining us. So as regards the country as a whole, it seems to be holding up. As Bronwyn suggested, certain areas, particularly students, are struggling. I'm relieved I've only got one student HMO, and that's been full and continues to be full because I've got, I spotted the COVID crisis coming and I only rent to international students. What else is there? Yes. Bronwyn mentioned, certainly as regards Birmingham, one of the things I would say is that the feedback I'm getting from other investors is service accommodation in the city centre is struggling at the moment because there's very little hospitality occurring. I'm sure that's been replicated throughout the country. So if you're going into that area, I would suggest certainly service accommodation is being proposed as a very busy market next year. And if you're going into the market, then make sure you aim for the areas where people are going to be looking to do staycations. So definitely Cornwall, Devon, obviously the south and southeast, Hampshire, Sussex, and down south Kent. Definitely areas to look at. Make sure you're targeting the right products for the right people. In the Midlands, it's very much a contractor market, because there's no hospitality, but that is very buoyant because of HS2 and the redevelopment of Birmingham at the moment. So sorry it took so long, but as you cut me off the last time when I was just getting to my stride.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, I couldn't even remember your last comment, to be fair. So it's quite nice to have an insight from you this time. The question I had from Michael was, Bron, you previously mentioned about homeless, which is another property strategy, which is also, you can make money, but also it's about giving back. And we know that homelessness potentially will rise in next year, potentially. How do you help society through the homeless and rehousing people, but also how do you make that a viable property strategy?
Yes, well, this has been an interesting experience for me because I didn't go into it with that in mind. I came across the opportunity to use the council and to help the council house emergency requirements for council house tenants. And that's usually because somebody who's already living in council accommodation either has a fire, a flood, have the wrong cladding on their blocks of flats, or maybe domestic abuse, violence in the family, children's issues. And there's a whole raft of things in between. And we started working with our local council in Southampton and providing short-term accommodation per night. So we established a trading business. It's very different to residential. This is trading every day. We have a live-in manager. I have somebody that manages the managers. And that really worked well with one property. And then because it worked so well, we were full. Other councils had been talking to Southampton. They put them in touch with us. We now have 5 councils that use us. So as our world of helping support sort of fairly vulnerable people expanded, the Southampton approached us over a year ago now and said the government was offering grants to help the homeless, and would we work with them because they knew us well? Could we help them establish a way of getting people off the streets? So we trialed a period for 4 months last winter, and it worked really well. And the great thing about them coming to us was that we could then say to them, well, the best way of working with you is to dedicate a property to this, because it's very difficult to mix this type of guest. And we say that the council have to provide a social worker, and they have to see them within the first 24 hours of them staying with us. And it's a requirement that they see somebody. We support them, we treat them with respect. If they don't respect our rules and they bring drugs or alcohol onto the premises, then we ask them to leave. And it's been a brilliant success. 60% of those in that first 4 months were off the street and being supported by social workers. So they come to us initially, they maybe stay with us for a few weeks, and then they move on to the next stage of accommodation. So it's very much short term. And because it worked so well during the winter, they carried on. And then with COVID, they were given more money by the government. We had to take everybody off the street, whether they wanted to or not. So we dedicated a second property to them. So we've got something like 25-30 rooms for street homeless. And I've been in YPN magazine talking about it, trying to encourage other people to consider this and not run a mile, because the council have supported us in providing us with furniture and bedding, because as you know, it's not easy with this type of group, and we do need to replace the furniture after a few months. So that's fine, it's working well.
Good. I wanted to emphasize that point to everyone listening in, because it's fair enough that we all on this panel talk about property investing from a service provision, but sometimes it's good to know from listening in to people like Paul, Tim, Bronwyn, myself, Simon, Teresa, all about what we do, property investing as well. And it'd be an interesting, from you to be able to take on board some of the positives that we have, because we wouldn't be on this panel if we didn't think that property investing had a long-term future, which I think we all feel the same. One of the things that Abs Hammond has asked a question was about partnerships. And he talks about partnership splits But then went on. There was another conversation about, I think he's asked the same question as well, about mortgages. Simon, if someone is getting into a partnership, so let's say that I've got 100% of the property income because the properties are on my name, the mortgages are in my name. If I enter into a partnership agreement whereby 50% goes to a JV partner, what's my obligations because of the terms and conditions for mortgages? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
I thought I clicked the mute button. My mouse narrowly missed the on button there. so just so I fully understood, Simon. So we're talking about a property that is owned by an individual, yeah, and they go into a JV. But is the second individual then on the mortgage or not on the mortgage?
Not on the mortgage currently. And the question needs to be is, should they be on the mortgage itself? Would that cause issues if they weren't on a mortgage for the banks?
Yes. So by the T's and C's of your mortgage, you need to declare anyone who's got a financial interest in the property. So if you've gone into a JV, there's a degree of assumption on my part that there'd be a cash injection or a consideration paid by the JV partner into the business, and that needs to be represented in terms of your interest in the business. So therefore they would need to go on the mortgage for sure, and that's generally the only way you can do it. You're obviously, investors do borrow money from other people to put into projects. That's a completely different topic, and there are some lenders that are comfortable with that and some lenders who are definitely not comfortable with that kind of scenario. But yeah, you'd need to change the mortgage, I think, is the short answer.
Okay. And on that point, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening in, don't just simply go to a partnership agreement without speaking to a solicitor first to protect your assets, to protect you and your individuals. Don't forget, you are going to connect yourself potentially financially to someone else. That can also lead to problems. And the third thing I would say about any partnership issues like this is, if you put them on the mortgage, it creates a stamp duty land tax issue. So please be careful in that regard. Don't go just willy-nilly in that approach. Just stay with you, Simon, for a second. There is a question from Deepak this time around saying, how do you see refinancing refurbishment properties in 2021? I personally see evidence of this, whereby mortgage lenders aren't saying what the market value is. What they're saying is, what did you buy the property at? How much did you spend on the refurbishment? And we'll mortgage it to that level now, which is completely different to the old buy, refurb, refinance strategy that people will see on YouTube. What's your predictions to 2021 and the lender's capacity to lend on that basis?
All right. Well, okay, there are definitely two parts to that. So first of all, it is vital and key to make sure that when you're undertaking a remortgage, that you've discussed what your expectations are and you've disclosed everything to the broker. So from my perspective, there are lenders that I know I can go to who will give 75% of what you can prove you've spent, which is what you were just referring to, Simon. And then there are other lenders that will go to 75% of market value. Now, lots of those lenders disappeared through the lockdown and post-lockdown because they were scared of inflated prices. They've now got a bit more comfortable with the fact that the market is moving in a direction and they kind of see where that direction is. So there are a few more lenders that will do that, but not every lender will do it. In terms of doing that in 2021, obviously, the trick here is knowing where your property is going to value in the future. And clearly that's quite difficult in a market that could go either way. So first of all, the number one thing you can do to minimize that risk is to make sure that you have a building team on hand, ready to start the job, who have a good track record. They might not be as cheap, but what you want is to get in and out as quickly as possible. That minimizes your risk and your exposure to market fluctuations, but also minimizes your risk in terms of lender risk, i.e. that I still have lenders on the book that will do what we need to do. So the longer you take, the more risk there is. There's definitely a risk that if the market's going to go down, you are going to create a property that isn't worth as much perhaps as you've spent on it. So it definitely requires you to buy very, very carefully. You buy profit, yeah, at the beginning. you deal, and whilst I think, you know, Paul and Bronwyn and what have you highlighted, it's very hard to buy the right project right now at the right price. It's not impossible, but it's very, very hard. But
Yeah,
whatever we must do as investors is not become motivated buyers. Yeah, we want motivated sellers, but we don't want to be a motivated buyer, because as a motivated buyer, you will ignore everything that you need to do to get right. Yeah. Does that I think that covers it, Simon, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I mean, moving on to a different scenario, but if you are acquiring a property, Bob's asked, this is on YouTube Live. So if you are on YouTube Live, don't forget to press that like button, because we do like that like button being pressed, and the subscribe channel, the button as well for subscribe. Please press on both of those buttons. And with that said, we are going to move over to Bob's question, YouTube Live question now. And it's saying, when purchasing a property with a sitting tenant, what are your options? Evict, nice for Christmas, enforce new tenancy, and what's right does the tenants have? Thank you. So let's move over to Teresa first, and then Tim. You know, if you have got, I've seen this situation before whereby you're buying a property, and it's happened to me before actually, bought a property and the rent's never been increased for 15 years. And you kind of really think, well, hold on a minute, if I get rid of them, again, not Christmas, please, but if you got rid of them in, let's say, February, I'll make more money. But what's the downfalls taking that approach, Teresa?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? Is it that they are buying a property with a tenant in it, or they're wanting to sell one with it?
So they want to buy a property and they want to know, what can they do with that tenant? Can they evict them? Can they do something else with them?
Well, eviction at the moment is really not the route to go, because, you know, issuing the Section 21, the no fault route to possession, that's a 6-month notice, and there's like a massive backlog in the courts as well. So yeah, they could evict them, but it would take them a long time. It could take them up to a year to get them out, and that's the only legal way to get them out. So
would you not buy it vacant possession? But of course, the person selling currently needs to give them notice. Are they allowed to give them notice at the moment to an existing tenant because they're selling?
Yeah, they can give them notice, so they can use Section 21 still, but it could take about 12 months to see it through.
Okay, so
just adding to that point, if I was to buy a house now for myself, and I'll open this up to Teresa and to Tim, but if I was buying a home for myself and it's got a tenant in there, and I'm in process of selling my house, what do I do if I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm about to buy a house?
Well, I mean, basically, tenants are protected by the Housing Act, so you literally would be stuffed in that situation, because you can't do anything with those tenants but go down the route of official possession. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, man with the scythe. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, no, to be honest, I think Teresa's entirely right. At the moment, it's like a lot of things at the moment, it's a practical issue. The delays are just so enormous. The court delays are just colossal. In fact, any government institution, in my experience, is slow, and the courts are merely one example. In fact, one of my team is actually a district judge, and as good as he wants to be, there's only a limit to what he can do. They haven't had good support with technology, so he's expected to do a whole load of things you wouldn't expect a judge to do. But yeah, ultimately, it's a practical problem. So I think the advice would be, if you want to move into a place, don't move in there if there's a tenant, because otherwise you may have major problems. Make sure it should remain the problem of the vendor. If you need a vacant possession, make sure you get vacant possession. Don't take it on with the view you get it. It's their problem, not yours. Or rather, make it their problem, not yours.
I mean, you could try and incentivize a tenant to move out. A sort of a cash deal.
Again, I'd leave that to the vendor. Make sure they sort it out.
Yeah.
If it goes pear-shaped. I think it's far too risky at the moment. Make it their problem, not yours. Otherwise, you're taking on a risk. If you're happy with that risk, fine, but it's a risk. So, Simon, if you're thinking of moving into somewhere, don't. Unless you've got the chap out first. There you go. Okay. Christmas present to you, Simon.
Tim.
Free legal advice.
There's Tim with yet another Christmas present for anyone looking to buy a home. Don't is the answer to that. So going on to something slightly different, but it's good to think about this in 2021. And Rachel's asked, when calculating the yield, and this is coming to you, Paul, so I'm looking forward to this exciting revelation from you. When calculating the yield on a rental property, do you add any other fees into the cost price, such as legal, surveys, and refurb? Do you then adjust it with a property revaluation after the refurb?
Yes and no. Thank you.
Fantastic. As expected. As expected.
Right. Okay. It depends if you want to kid yourself. Look at what you do buy the property for, add in all the costs, because it's not just your purchase price, it's your stamp duty, it's your solicitor's fees. Although don't forget, I think I'm right in saying you can't claim them now on your tax return. You can't claim as a deduction on your tax.
Certain costs you can, certain costs.
But yeah, adding all the costs, the evaluations and everything else, because only then will you realise what the true yield you're going to get. And yes, if you then revalue and you can refinance, and obviously if you're going to do that by using LMPG services such as our superb kitchens that I mentioned earlier, bathroom suites, paints, etc., etc., it does help to assist on your evaluation and make sure that you are putting quality products into your new acquisitions, because it's an investment. And why would you want to put cheap in when you just got to go back in 1 or 2 or 3 years time and replace it? So do it right. And I'm sure if you go to Bronwyn's foundation course, then that will lead you down the road to make sure you do it right.
Indeed. And actually on that point, Paul, and Rachel, I wouldn't measure yield. Agents talk about yield, but actually I use return on investment. So return on the money that you've put into the deal. So that's all your costs, including the deposit, and you divide that by the annual interest, annual interest divided by the money you put in. So the annual profit you make from that investment. Now, I'm happy to send you a copy of my webinar on just this topic. So if you email me, I'll send you a link. Okay.
That'd be good. And talking of return on investment, one thing I would say to anyone buying properties is make sure that you put a fair value on each of those items, because it's so tempting when people got Excel spreadsheets that they put together a set of numbers and it doesn't give them the result to pursue that property. And the temptation is to downgrade the cost, upgrade the revenue to make it work for you. And that's going against the whole purpose of what due diligence is. So if it does give you the negative results or the worst case scenario, sometimes is just to move on to the next property. So don't manipulate yourself. If you do that, go somewhere else, as in go to someone else, ask them to do due diligence for you, and then make sure you buy that right deal. Don't forget, if you are on YouTube Live, that you can ask questions. So we do want you to ask your questions, so make sure that you do ask those. I'm reading up from our questions that are coming through, but I want to go to a YouTube live question now. So let's just have a look at Ivor. So Ivor says, can you remortgage a flat before the new 125-year new lease has been registered at land registry, or do you have to wait? Currently, there is a large backlog. Wow. Okay. So let's have a look at Simon Hodgson first, obviously, and then move on to Tim on terms of leases.
Wow, that's quite an open-ended question there. I've got to make some assumptions. This is a purchase that the buyer has asked the seller to trigger clause 42, which is the automatic rights to renewal of the lease. The discussions have taken place with the freeholder so that there's a consideration cost that's been agreed to be paid to the freeholder, and that as the transaction completes, the lease extension is actually built into the transaction. So the lease has extended at the point of completion. Will it be registered with land registry at that point? No, it won't. However, you will have been able to cover off in fine detail with the lender's solicitors that the legal process has taken place. So therefore the new lease is there. That's one scenario. Second scenario is that potentially this person's buying without the lease extended at the point of completion. Now, if that's the case, again, we have to go back to clause 42. Has that been triggered? Then the lease extension can take place relatively swiftly after completion. If that hasn't happened, then you've got to wait for up to 2 years if you haven't got a compliant freeholder. And there are many, many more scenarios that Tim can cover, I'm sure. Typically, though, we also need to know how long is the current lease. So it's generally accepted that anything from 60 years and under is a really short lease and can't be funded. There are a couple of lenders out there that will fund those short lease properties as long as there's 50 years left on the lease at the end of the mortgage term. So you could effectively take a 7-year mortgage on a 57-year lease, so that as long as the mortgage has expired or concludes before the 50-year anniversary takes place. I think I've covered as many scenarios on that question as I think are relevant to right now. But we need more information. I think more meat on the bones from whoever's asking that question to better answer it fully, to be fair.
Okay. So anything on mortgages, on lease extensions, anything to be cautious about, things that you should do proactively?
A couple of things. Certainly in terms of the mortgage point, I'd either refer to Simon or speak to one of my team who deal with the practical stuff. But a couple of things. We have a number of clients now who actually use buying short leases as a property strategy, because sometimes short leases are very difficult to sell. As Simon says, it really depends on with the lender. And I think it's actually the Council of Mortgage Lenders has a particular page where actually they go through each and every lender and their policy on lending on leasehold property. So you can actually get just a very rough idea. But as Simon says, once it gets below 70, it's difficult. Once below 60, really hard. So we've had clients buying sort of 50 or 35, 40-year properties cash. Now that can sometimes be a real bargain because no one wants to touch them. And why? Because you're going to have to buy them cash. So sometimes you can get real bargains. Unfortunately, a lot of agents don't understand this. And so they'll put on artificially high prices and it'll just sit and sit and sit. So again, some of the people that we know who do this as a policy, actually, as a strategy rather, they'll put in an offer, but they'll accept that actually it might be ignored because it's way below what the agent has said. Oh, you can get much more than that. And of course, 3 or 6 months later, it's still sitting there. So every month or two, they simply come say, hi guys, I'm still here. It's the same offer. And sometimes after months, actually, the agent thinks, actually, I'm going to have to do something with it, that the poor vendor is actually being confronted with reality that he's not going to get the price he needs. So sometimes that is a useful strategy. We even have one guy we know, one only, who does bridging for short leases. I'm not entirely sure what his rates are, but he's the only person I know in the country who provides bridging to buy short leases for cash. So I think there are real possibilities, but it is something you need to know more about. And going back to my legal masterclass, legal lease extension will be one of the subjects we're dealing with. I do think it's a strategy that very, very few people know about. And the beauty is because so few people do it, even in the current market where prices are, to use my own phrase, frothy. Actually, you've got so little competition. If you've got a cash buyer, if you get the right deal, it can be a good bargain.
And a lot of the time you have to educate the estate agents. So,
oh, yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, I've done this a lot, it's important that you treat them with respect, but, sometimes they need to understand the reality and explain that back to the vendor. But also working with your best solicitor, Tim, as well, because if you're going to do this as a regular strategy, I'm sure that your wonderful solicitor will do you a deal on the price of extending leases, because if you're doing multiple, maybe 10, 20 a year, I'm sure you can negotiate.
We're always happy to have conversations.
I'm going to stay with you, Tim, for a second. Again, another YouTube Live. So if you've got any questions on this YouTube Live session tonight, then make sure you ask that question. Let's not have you leave this session by thinking, I wished I asked that question. Well, here's your opportunity. Make sure you do. So I'm not going to say this. I think it's Palm Golf IP. Wow, that's an interesting user profile. So Palm Golf IP says, I have a question regarding PD for Tim. When does the minimum size requirement come in for a studio? Is it April 6th, 21?
I believe it's April 21. Whether it's the 6th, I believe it is April, yeah. And certainly that one of my flats that I converted would not have been possible, which would mean the whole ground floor wasn't possible. And I think it's personally madness, I think. But anyway, yes, it is coming in 37, which is already the national size limit, but there was an exception made for permitted development.
Okay.
So, yes,
George, I mean, just for people that aren't aware of what that really is talking about.
Right. Broadly, there have always been restrictions on the size of flats, and 37 square metres was seen to be the size. Permitted development is a type of planning permission that means you don't need full planning permission, provided you tick certain boxes, like a commercial conversion. You still have to go through building regs and have to go through the council, but in theory, you should get planning automatically. Not as simple as that. They rejected mine first time round. It was the wrong sort of office. We proved them wrong, but anyway, that's typical councils. But the difference is there have been a lot of moans about tiny flats. Now, there are undoubtedly some, as you'll always get, some rip-off developers, doing these tiny flats that frankly you can't swing a cat or even a mouse in, 15 square meters or whatever. And the public got up in order. You can't live in these kind of places, totally ignoring the fact that the local authority are putting people in homeless B&Bs. Perhaps you get an entire family in one room that's perhaps 10 by 12, and yet somehow a single person can't live in a place that's 30 square meters. Bar me, from my point of view, but that's governments for you. So as from April, if you go for permitted development, you won't be able to get away with what I did, that 30 square metre size. In fact, it was 30.7 square metres to be precise. You have to go to a minimum of 37. And I think that'll take the edge of some permitted developments, because a lot of the bigger profits were on the smaller flats, and some of them won't simply allow the right number of flats. That in my building, 3 stories, 2 flats on each floor. If you took out the bottom flat, you'd have had to have 4 flats and an office. It would have been less attractive.
Tim, you seem to be very popular at the minute. People are asking for the link for the lease masterclass that you talked about. Could you put that into the chat box so we can?
No, because there isn't one yet. Okay. We'll do it very quickly. We've done all the broad. I've simply got to fiddle around with it. So there isn't actually a link. If you'd like, if people would like to email me, I'm more than happy to get back. I've put my email address down there. That's probably the simplest way. I will put it on Facebook. I'll put it elsewhere. I'll bring it up next time. But at the moment, we don't have a link because it hasn't actually been finalised. So if I just put my email, people are more than happy to email me, and I'll get back to them. Is that okay?
Yeah, if you put an email in the chat box, then I'll just put that into you.
That's the Zoom group chat. Yep.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do it now. Thanks.
Fantastic. So in terms of the talking about those flats, I mean, I remember staying in an apartment in London. We talk about minimum spot size, and I always remember that I would go to the dentist, and they would always complain, saying, "Well, why aren't your teeth clean?" And the reason for that is because I could only brush them like that. So only my front tooth ever got cleaned. I couldn't do that because I'd be hitting the wall. So I could only do it that way. That's why my dentist got that excuse. So we are coming to a close, but I still want to see your questions come up. So if you've got questions about property investing, then please do get those questions in. I kind of feel like I've exhausted the ones that I think is relevant. There is one before I heard someone shout, but let me just, there's one question that came up about, and this is talk about lessons learned on the setting up of HMOs that can be shared. And this is from John Mills. And John said, can the cost of works to change from a 6-bed HMO to sui generis attract reduced VAT on the basis of change of dwelling types? Here's the interesting thing. You can get, so typically whenever you're doing a refurb, this is a big game changer for many of you. Whenever we're talking about property strategies, we shouldn't just be talking about stamp duty, land tax, income tax, corporation tax, capital gains tax. There's the element of VAT as well. And many people aren't always aware that you can reduce VAT from 20% down to 5%, and sometimes from 20% to 5% to 0%. Depending on what you're doing. So do make sure that you understand if you're moving from, let's say, a commercial dwelling to residential, you get a reduction of VAT on materials and labor from 20% down to 5%. So that saves you a tremendous 15% of your costs. And if you're converting a single-let dwelling into a licensed HMO, then again, you will get that reduction of VAT from 20% down to 5%. And sometimes if you're converting commercial to residential, then selling it, you can even claim back the 5% as well. Here's an interesting one though, which is something that I recently come back to, was someone that was buying a property, and basically it was dilapidated. And the fact that a property is dilapidated is no longer, as the Buda case, for anyone that says involved in this one, but the Buda case was someone bought a property, it was run down, didn't really have things to make it a livable property. And they went to court, and it was classed really as a non-residential property. Back then, that was great because they had a lower amount of SDLT at the front end on the banded rate, and the 3% SDLT rate, of high rate, did not apply. But coupled with that, if they teamed up with Optimize, they would have known this, that the VAT of taking a dwelling that's been empty for more than 2 years, if you refurbish that property, then the VAT on that type of property would also be reduced from 20% down to 5%. So there's huge amounts of savings. So if you're looking at boarded up properties, make sure you not only get a better deal in terms of below market value, but think about all the taxes that are appropriate for that type of structure, and speak to your accountant and property tax specialist to understand how you can lower those. Now, I did hear someone shout out, but I didn't cotton on who it was. So who wants to raise a point? Bronwyn, go for it. You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry, I was okay. We were talking about, you mentioned commercial to residential. I think we say these things so quickly, it's quite difficult for people to perhaps catch up. But also Tim mentioned permitted development. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that the government last week, I think it was last week, have a new consultation on permitted development for commercial, for high street shops to residential. And it's just an 8-week consultation, which is the shortest I think anyone has ever been. Sometimes they're like a year. So the government really wants us to build. They're really keen that high streets don't become deserts, and that opportunities to convert to residential, they're making it a lot easier. So have a little look on my Facebook page, but we can put it on the YouTube as well. There's a consultation there. For those people who are experienced and who are looking at doing development or conversions, I think there's going to be a great opportunity next year for this, because councils can't stop. They might want to put Article 4 in, but it'll take them 9 months to get that approved. So I think we've got a big window of opportunity here as investors. Anyone else got a view?
Simon, you must have a view.
I have.
Go on, Tim.
I think certainly it's been blatantly obvious for years that retail on the high street is dying, and I think COVID has simply accelerated it. So a lot of things that would have happened over 5-10 years have happened very quickly. The only drawback I see from this point of view, apart from whatever the government finally decide, and they're very good at making announcements about what they're going to do, but actually the detail is in the detail. But I think the big issue could well be commercial agents. In my experience, commercial agents often ask unreasonable rents at the moment, and there's certainly many properties I've looked at over the years where, and spoken to local agents, and particularly London agents, they don't want to start dropping prices, because once they do, everyone else starts dropping prices and their percentage gets lower. So that's one reason there have been so many empty properties on the high street, because the rents have been far too high. Now, a lot of these organisations also, a lot of the shops are owned by pension schemes, and pension schemes are very slow to change. And I think a lot of them will be very reluctant to drop prices. Long term, I think they'll have to, but actually short to medium term, I can see there's going to be a lot of resistance. And if prices don't come down, the whole thing doesn't make sense, because at the moment retail prices are way above a residential. So retail would really have to drop rock bottom. It's way below commercial. So I think it's a great possibility, and there may be individual opportunities, but I think it won't be what it should be because of commercial agents and pension companies.
Yeah. It's one of the trickiest, or it's the trickiest area at the moment in terms of valuations. Within commercial property, there's something known as strength of covenant, which is the tenant that you have in the building helps define the building's value. So if you have an empty building, it's automatically going to value less. If you were to sign up a blue chip company, let's say a Costa with a 15-year full repairing lease, no break clauses, you can double, sometimes more, the value of your property. But also that can work in reverse. And whilst I can't name names, there are high street lenders out there at the moment that are still predicting up to 40% drop in some commercial prices. Now, I can't believe that can possibly be possible for this very reason. PD writes in there, a property can't drop by 40%. There'll be a point at which it drops, and then it becomes realistic as a conversion into something else. So therefore, its change of use then makes sense. So the PD is pretty clever, I think, in terms of places. And certainly, that holds true for fringe commercial properties at the end of high streets, etc., or second grade shopping streets, effectively, where there are also, there was always a bit of void periods and or shops that weren't let. But yeah, it's a really, really tricky time, and getting funding's hard at the moment. So 65% loan to value is the maximum you're going to get in that area for sure, and they need a really good reason to lend you 65%. Otherwise, they're going to drop it below that. But if you've got a really good tenant and you can prove that the tenant has paid consistently through lockdown, they're not impossible to fund.
I think the other problem, of course, is light. Certainly when I was looking at sort of commercial buildings, a lot of them are problems with light. And shops, generally, they have lovely, huge windows at the front and nothing else. So, certainly our Debenhams locally, for example, it just goes back and back and back and up and up and up. And apart from the front, there's no windows. So you have to do something pretty clever there. And then you're going to have to start fiddling around with the building. Once you fiddle around with the building, suddenly you go outside the areas of permitted development because you're having to talk about planning. So, and then once you get into planning on the high street, then I think local authorities, many are going to be very, very restrictive. So I'll be interested to see what happens. It's always possible. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, I think. I'm holding my breath on this one.
I mean, if you get it wrong, you will certainly be frothy at the mouth, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Now let's go over to Tim for a second, if you don't mind me asking. In terms of the online estate agent, okay, so online estate agents, they promise the world for less than 6%, less than 0.5% of the sales price. Would you use an online estate agent? I mean, there are good ones and there are bad ones, but typically, do you think online estate agents are better or worse than high street estate agents when looking to buy or indeed sell properties?
Can I chip in there a sec?
No.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Of course you can. You go ahead. It's Christmas. I'm very, very generous.
As a general rule of thumb, if I've got an instruction come in and I know that it's an online estate agent who is part of that transaction, I can guarantee I will not get chased by the estate agent to see where the deal is at any point ever, as long as that mortgage goes through. If it's a normal estate agent, that normal estate agent's sales progression team will be on the phone finding out, have I got the instruction? When did the mortgage valuation get instructed? When is this happening? When's that happening? There's a reason they charge a percentage, because there's a package they deliver to help your transaction take place.
That's a good point. That is a good point. And that's well interrupted. That was worth it. So I'm pleased that I was so generous to come on to you. Paul Hilliard, what's your views on online estate agents?
I've got no direct experience, I hasten to add, but I've heard very mixed comments from other people as regards certain online estate agents who have simply put the board up, charged the fee, and then totally forgotten. And then when it's sold, they come back and knock on the door and say, can we have the balance of our fee, whether they've been involved in the sale or not. So I would always say, be careful. See what negotiate with your local online. I'm currently selling my property, my home residence, and I've done a deal at 0.5% plus VAT. So it can be done, and that's with one of the best, the best estate, in case he's listening, the best estate agent in Solihull. So there you go. Can I just come back to you on homeless, which you ignored me on earlier?
No, I'm going to ignore you again. So I'm going to talk about Smurfs. Now, Smurfs are blue. They wear nice woolly hats, and they don't wear the ridiculous tops that Paul Hilliard or supports a rubbish team like Aston Villa. Of course, I'll come back to you.
Well, I don't know if I want to talk now. I was going to mention the fact that one of my companies is now a registered provider for social housing for Birmingham City Council, and we're working with one of the few compliant housing associations in Birmingham, which are not under investigation by Birmingham City Council. So if anyone's looking to develop their properties for use by the homeless, then please feel free to contact me, and we can discuss what you need to do and how you need to do it, certainly in the West Midlands area. So
maybe I'll tell you what, that is a fantastic idea for a spotlight for you and Bronwyn to do together to talk about homeless, because I do think that's a great strategy. Listen, we are now on track for an 8:30 finish. So as professional as we can all be wearing these ridiculous jumpers, Bronwyn, would you like to say your piece and to sign us off for this evening?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for hosting the event. It's been another very quick hour and a half. I just don't know where the time goes. I know we've answered pretty much everybody's questions. So yeah, thank you to all our experts, and don't forget your Christmas presents from us all. And I think if you add it all up, it's probably at least £400 worth of benefits there. And mine's £200, so that's pretty good, isn't it? So don't forget, have a look on the YouTube links. You can go back, you can watch this again. You can see all the links there to get your bargains, and you can contact us all. All our details are on the YouTube underneath there. So if you want to email any of us and talk to us in a bit more detail, then please do. So yeah, don't forget, make the most of these offers, because they're not going anywhere else, are they? This is just to you guys, just to our expert panel audience. Thank you very much, and happy Christmas.
Yeah, happy Christmas. And don't forget, it is going to be the new year when we come and see you. So don't forget, it is going to be, I'm just checking my diary, it is going to be the 4th of January 2021. So that's clearly perfect. People will be revitalized and feeling rather fat as we eat too much. But until then, thank you and have a fantastic Christmas, and see you in the new year. Good night.
Yes. Happy Christmas. Bye-bye.
Simon disappeared.